Bonjour à tous.
Hello everybody and welcome to VIDEOFORMES 2021 and to the digital acts number 2, our new format for professional encounters. Before letting Elise, who's going to be facilitating these 3 half days, I'd like you to remain at the same address at 6 p.m. and follow us to be able to see the different exhibition spaces for VIDEOFORMES 2021, because the exhibitions exist really and not virtually. And so they will be accessible to the professionals who want to visit us by registering on our site videoform.com. Now you, Elise. So thank you very much, Gabrielle. So I'd like to add welcome to the COVID Forms 2021 with the brutal stop last year. This year we decided that COVID and co-video could work, and so we're doing it. And all the team is working hard this year to be able to offer us these days and these exchanges. So I'd like to thank people, first of all. Thank you for the entire of the VIDEOFORMES team. More specifically to Tessa and Garance, who are the famous team, Garance is not far from me and who's helping me out, and who's been supporting me in these professional days. I'd also like to thank the University Culture Department, Evelyne Ducrot, as well, the Clément Massif Central organization, and also for the technical aspects. I'd like to thank Vidileo and also Communimage. So thank finally to the local authorities for giving us this room, and also for the team of these Confront room who are not very far away, and make sure that these days will be successful. So finally, thank you to the artists, to the voluntaries, associated commissaries, to the students, and all the people who have engaged themselves with myself and the team. And also, finally, thank you, everybody who are following us at the moment. I think sitting down in your sofas is one of the advantages of this period, and then ready to make their comments or to ask questions. So I'd like to specify, for those people who are in the room, there will be a microphone which will be given by Garance. So don't hesitate if you've got any questions or comments to ask her, and that way we'll be able to record and translate by myself the answers into English. I just want to quickly explain how things are going to happen for these 3 half days. So we're going to repeat this exercise 3 times. First of all, we're going to begin with Philippe Franck will be presenting this afternoon's session. And then afterwards, after the focus of about 3/4 an hour, then we'll come back here and have a Q&A session for lasting 10 minutes. Then afterwards, Garance will present the 2 artists who themselves have worked on 10-minute videos to present their work. And then the 3rd session will be another Q&A session with the 3 guests, the 2 artists and the commissionary, and he'll be joining us on Skype. So we're beginning today, Thursday the 18th, and we'll start again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock on focus number 2, and the 3rd session tomorrow afternoon. So just in terms of quick introduction, I wanted to talk about the editorial we co-signed, which called Essentially Yours. So the idea, as you've understood, is to give a bit of humanity to our day-to-day lives. So you know that maybe you're all very curious that the art and culture are one of the means in any way to reconstruct ourselves, which are emerging in the crisis and also post-crisis. These studies have been carried out in Canada, in which will be interesting to talk about. It's true that we can't travel physically at the moment. It's true, and we're even in fact quite restricted in terms of our movements. And so this morning I had a bit of information from a radio station France called France Info. At the moment people are lacking things at the moment, and there's a period of revenge. And so normally it's not always positive, but this one will be This is the revenge travel, so the idea of having to escape to travel. So this afternoon, this is what I'm inviting you to, is a virtual revenge travel with video forms. So hopefully we're going to be able to travel in time with the ideas, with our imagination, and hopefully satisfy as much as possible, even though for most of you it's virtual. So maybe just a quick recommendation before we launch the presentation of Philippe Franca. For those who are listening to us, make sure that you mute your microphone so that you don't impact the recording and the exchanges. So now we're going to present you Philippe Frank, and it's Garance who's going to present Transcultures and the European Incubators of Creation. Thank you, Elise. So I'm going to begin by presenting Philippe Franca. So he's an artistic historian of art, sound creator, and intermedia expert. And he's the manager Transcultures, the sound culture center. He's also the artistic manager of the European Incubators of Creation network. He is a professor in several Belgian schools where he analyzes image, the theory of media, and sound theory. Also, very regularly, he's a critic with different French-speaking magazines, in particular Turbulence Video and of VIDEOFORMES. And now we're going to launch the presentation of Philippe Franck. Hello, I'm called Philippe Franck. I'm the manager of Transcultures in Belgium. Transcultures, Center of Interdisciplinary Digital and Sound Cultures, and also the manager of Transcultures Europe, which is a European incubator of creation, of which the head office is at Paris for the incubators. And I'll talk about this in the last part of the presentation. First of all, Transcultures is an organization which exists since 1996 in Brussels and works specifically on the cross-border between art, society, and technology to be able to promote the intermediate cross-functionalities and also sound and digital culture. When we talk about sound culture, there's a good example here with the City Sonic Festival, which we created in 2003 in Mons in Belgium, which where we are at the time has now traveled to different towns in Charleroi, La Lumière and Brussels. City Sonics is a festival of sound in which all the different arts of sounds who work of sound as material, sculptural or performance art with different entries, sound poetry, the art, the digital and sound, the architecture design. So how does this resonate with the life and urban spaces? So every time we have a little trip in 15 different spaces in a city. So we've got performances, workshops of raising awareness for sound arts for children people. So City Sonic is a festival that we've managed by Transcultures since 2003, which enables us to help to disseminate, to create and to promote and to produce a whole series of sound artists, once again, by different entry points in different spaces with a contextual context, which is a very strong one. Also a festival which can be seen in other countries than Belgium, whether it's Tunisia, Romania, Quebec, or Ivory Coast, just to give you a few examples. Another festival which we have, which is Transnumeric, which is a festival of digital cultures and emergences, as it explores different things which are close to digital art by looking to see what happened before we had digital art the video, multimedia, the electronic cultures on their different forms. And this is more focused on image, but the image in a hybrid interdisciplinary relation, and with an intention on the different emergences, the young artists, the artists which we've supported throughout the year, but also the artists of an international dimension and well-known ones. When recently we've focused on partnerships with museums, with in cultural institutions which are more traditional, which normally would not have integrated the digital culture. This was the case with an exhibition in La Louvière digital icon. Another event, this is vice versa, which is the cross-border meeting between culture and science, but also always putting the artist and the creative process at the heart of its questions. And so Transculture acts also as an intermediary between university laboratories, in particular the media University Art in Mons, and also other artistic collaborations via European projects, so they can have access to means, to resources, and also to researchers who work with them, which enables the artists to go further in terms of their technology, but also keeping their project. We also do a series of conferences, workshops throughout the year with all the art schools. It's important for us to look about the emergence of sound, and there's also workshops in art schools where we accompany students with artists as facilitators, and where we promote and we broadcast their work, and also in our festivals, but also the workshops for children, we call Sodi Kids, for fun sounds, and also digital practices. Transculture, as its name indicates, is the transcultures, not geographic cultures, but also society reflection, technological reflections, but also international exchanges are very important for us here with Quebec since quite a few years, with the exchanges with the Chambre Blanche, the White Room in Quebec, which is a digital art center with also residencies mixing researchers and artists, and also the production réseau in Quebec around the new forms of sound poetry and the link between live literature and the other contemporary practices, including digital and sound. All this gives rise to residencies and exhibitions, festivals, sometimes the transatlantic ones, and the hybrid festivals, which we've been doing with the réseau in Quebec, are very fertile. The exchange is not just in Western countries, but also in the east of Europe, in Romania, with the Simultan Festival. Another example in Abidjan for the International Digital Art and Visual Encounters, of which we are also a regular partner with for Transculture and the European Incubator of Creation. These international encounters enables us to do co-productions, maybe more ambitious ones, which we wouldn't be able to do alone, but also to circulate a community of artists for digital sounds and intermedia, which Transculture supports in a regular way. So there's also the publications. We publish things. There's also the aspect of reflecting on these practices for both sound and culture, and the artistical technological shifts are very important for us. We're not technophiles or technophobes. We're trying to think about these stakes and not to be prisoners of them. In particular, are they sound publications we created, transonic labels for other types of sounds. We do CDs, vinyl, even cassettes, and even publications around the sound, which for us are very important because we work with publishing houses, publishers quite regularly. In terms of the European Incubators of Creation, this is, or the European Pépinières of Creation, this is part of the European Incubators for Young Artists, which at its used to do, brought together 30 countries outside of Europe and 30 other organizations to do exchanges on mobility and professionalization of young artists, and also residencies around a whole series of organizations with contemporary art in general. This is also for art as dance, contemporary dance, and sound, and all the other different interdisciplinary arts. We created a new organization which is called Transculture European Incubator of Creation to try to develop an international network which helps these young artists, and we pushed it a little bit more on the encounters, interdisciplinary encounters, the new forms of hybridness and hybridism, also by pushing these exchanges between research, cultural industries, not just between artists, but obviously these notion of residencies, which today is in complete shifting at the moment, and not just because of the lockdown. So all these forms of transversality, hybrids, contemporary, digital sound, all of these are at the heart of the project of Transculture Europe, but also Transculture Belgium, but also the European Incubators of Creation. So here, this is to promote the more emerging projects and more cross-functional in terms of their international collaboration. It's also important what we've launched online these last period, notably, or thanks to the lockdown. So since March 2020, what we call No Lockdown Art, which is our online project, our platform Create Connections, which is to highlight productions, projects from artists from different trends, tendencies, different contemporary disciplines, to broadcast them with also to help them in terms of their production on the web, and to make the web a type of a new scene to broadcast sound, but also of exchange for these artists, for these contemporary hybrid digital sound projects. And I could say up to now we've had about 100 projects which have been broadcast like this, and which we're going to continue this no lockdown art with the desire to resist against the lockdown or confinement of creation. So Transculture, if you want to know more information, you go to look at the website. You can see our website, so you see on the screen. Thank you very much. Yeah, we were supposed to have an interview with Philippe Franck, who's direct from Belgium on Skype. So we're trying to catch him for the moment, but for the moment we want to ask him a couple of questions. So I'll take advantage of the moment we try to connect with him. I'd like to specify to those who are listening to us and who are on the live stream, so don't hesitate if they've got any question, ideas, comments they want to make. It will be a pleasure to talk about them during the roundtable with the artists Oscar A. and Alex Augier. So normally we should have the Skype, and normally Philippe is here. Can you hear me, Philippe? I can't hear Philippe. I think there's a sound problem here because we can't hear him. So who uses a sound creator? Unfortunately, we can't hear the sound. So can you hear me in the headphones? That's what you're saying, but unfortunately we can't hear you back. So while we're trying to solve the little technical issues, I'd like to thank Melting Trader. So I forgot to thank them. So thank you, Melting Trad, for the translation. For the English translation of these French discussions and videos. So I just want to specify that you've got two channels here that are available for the transmission of the professional days. You've got the Facebook Live, which is in French, and then you've got the YouTube video form channel, which is in English. So tomorrow's day will be in English on stage here, and we'll try and speak English as well as possible. And so if you want to listen to the French tomorrow, it'll be via Facebook. So can you hear us, Philippe? So maybe he can hear us with his headset. So just asking whether Philippe has not muted his microphone, maybe. So these are the problems when you're live and direct. So.
Alors, micro.
Ah, ça y est.
Okay, now finally we can hear you, Philippe. Great. So wonderful. So where are you at the moment? So I'm in Mons in Belgium because we had got an exhibition with 60 young artists, which is called on the theme of copying, and and I'm the curator of this. So we've got 10 quick minutes to have a quick discussion on the focus we've just seen. You already specified what is the no lockdown art selection, so maybe won't talk too much about that. But in your presentation, you used the term new scenes of broadcasting, which the web could be. You are at the cutting edge of technology. Is this true, something which is new for you, or it's simply a way of transmitting videos on the internet? So it's something which has become significantly intensified. We seem to look. So since March 2020, during the first lockdown, we were disseminating different types of creations on the web. It wasn't necessarily creations which were made for the web. It wasn't necessarily web art, but there was some web art. There's all types of creation, contemporary, interdisciplinary art, which could be broadcast on the web. That's why we launched this No Lockdown Art program, to be able to help these artists, to help them disseminate and broadcast their work. And since we've been submerged by a request, we had 400 proposals right at the beginning of March 2020, and we've put about 100 online, and we've retained maybe 50, which have helped. We're going to do a USB paper publication on this, but there's so many of them we're behind schedule, but this is a good sign. But we thought that this might stop, but it's continued. So I think in any way this broadcasting via the web as a platform of broadcasting creation, productions and progress with this kind of the instant aspect to it, even though we are not sort of Facebook obsessed type instant way of looking at things, but these are works of art which are seriously, very solidly done, but can have different phases. And here we've launched whole types of sub-actions which correspondence between poets and audio artists working together. We've launched live sessions which are done in the apartments or the rooms of the artist from our record label called Transcultures. We've also got some more specific projects like the Kika Canola, who's a Brazilian artist who comes here and launched her project Common Ground, which dozens of artists were collaborating by sending videos or multimedia fragments and sound, and they're publishing this together to do a collective work of art, which is showing itself in different forms on the web elsewhere, so it's off and online. So it's with this dialectic that things are interesting. We mustn't remain just in one single dimension. For us, the virtual and real aspects, are intimately linked. It's true, we're talking a lot about the post-COVID in the Philippe Boinard's film, when we're talking about a sort of post-human environment. There's not necessarily before and after COVID for transculture. There's an intensification, as I said earlier on, of this type of flow and this type of relations via the web. Right from the beginning in 1996, the creation of Transculture, the subtitle, the cross borders of flows. So I think we're completely in line with that. Obviously, there is going to be before and after COVID, as there's a lot of these reflections, existential reflections, and on the processes of disseminating production, or even how artists are going to survive. And this is really quite important. I think these questions, unfortunately, I would say, are going to last. But I think for culture, the post-COVID is going to be tricky. There's not much at the moment. and similar in a lot of countries. And for the post-COVID, I don't think straight away that there's going to be a lot of creation we've got to take advantage of this as an opportunity to change significantly these models, but we mustn't think that it's going to come from above. I think this is going to be more like a bottom-up way of working. So I think there's a real need coming from the field, coming from artists, and also for the associated operators to change things in the processes of our production and our broadcasting and dissemination. But we need the spectators and the visitors need to change their habits and not just be influenced by mediocre influences or sort of, we'd have to try to be more curious, look into more things. So, sorry, lines. So, which these creations online. So, I think of these. So the line's cutting out here, unfortunately. And this is what we're doing in Transculture and also in our incubators. So, Philippe, you're used to being in video form. We know your link between research. You talked about in your presentation about the return of cultural industries. What's quite new is, I think, the partnership with certain museums who wouldn't necessarily be open to this type of creation. Is this due to the situation or not at all? So here, once again, is something which pre-existed before as a trend, but this opening is being intensified in the Transnumeric with another festival we have for the image and cultural, technological, digital cultures. The museums wanted to go beyond their traditional way of exposing things, and this is showing things which they're not used to showing. This is echoing with other types of digital creators. And this is the same with the museum in La Lumière, which has happened with the largest university museum in Belgium, in Nouvelle Hanover, previously. And so we feel that this is something which is good news, whereas the museums are opening up to other types of art. And so this is very welcome to us. So even this is always something we've defended in Transculture, not to work simply with this small world of sound or digital art, but not to preach to the convinced, but that the transversality goes real with modes of culture, to work with more traditional modes of culture, and then to be able to work with them. And there was also a focus on publishing, a special type of publishing, in particular sound publishing. Could you talk a little bit about this? It's true. This is very interesting. We've got so many things to release, and so we've launched things online, albums online. But there's also from these online albums. I was talking about the sub-lockdown we've got on No Lockdown Art between poets, a lot of women poets from Lebanon or from Moscow or from France or from Belgium elsewhere who work with sound artists. Here we've got something which is of a really good quality, and this is not just a journal, a diary of the COVID or egoism, so which we normally see, but more of an in-depth reflection, very poetical, very philosophical, and which makes us go beyond our confined, our lockdown realities. With Philippe Franck, there's a project of a book, and with a well-known publishers in France, well, I'm not going to say who they are straight away, and with a Belgian publishers who work a lot, the Lettres Molières, with a publication with Catherine Godin, a Canadian poet. We've also got a publishing project in Moscow, and we're also going to have a book that's going to come out in Detroit with an American poet who's very engaged. Sorry, I didn't catch that. The sound's gone there, I'm afraid. about the riots which came after the George Floyd, the end of the horrible end of the Trump era, and also the artists and minorities are locked down over there in America. So it's very broad. So there's a real urgency of expression of quality, and we wanted to be able to give leave as many traces as possible, not just live but online, but on more conventional traces like records and books, and to all this urgency of expressing something which is in depth, on poetic depth, which has been happening during these months or maybe these years of lockdown. And this, for us, mustn't be a locked art, but in fact a freed up, connected art more than ever. Thank you very much, Philippe. Before wrapping up, there's Gabriel wants to ask you a question. Hello, Gabriel. So the question of the online broadcasting or dissemination, this supposes any business model. We know that in the current music model, it's accepted by the public. In the case of these videos, is there a business model? So for the moment, this is really done. This is coming from our own money and Transcultures. What we're trying to do is to create a multimedia library for other broadcasters, and so we haven't set this up already. We've already these videos are going elsewhere, not just VIDEOFORMES, but also in a festival in Abidjan and also a festival in Italy. So to remind you, the broadcasting dissemination model is not easy because these are sometimes festivals who are also struggling. And we're disseminating them free of charge because we think it's important. But I think for the sound, there's already a business model where people can purchase live sessions online or songs which are exclusive to the web. This works quite well. These are small sums, but as we've got quite a few of them around, this is a part of a mixed public, mixed private model which has been put into place, and I hope it's going to increase and grow. So on this question, I really didn't talk about this, but I don't know too much about it. We've got the cryptocurrencies. There's a work of art which is sold of the stories of the tokens, etc. So Gabriel is shaking his head when I talk about this. I don't know what's going to happen with this idea. We could be collectors and owners for a few seconds of work of others. Maybe it could be sports sequences or whatever. I don't know at all where it's going. I don't know if you've heard about it. Obviously, yes, I've heard about it. Obviously, we're working with artists or organizations who are trying to explore over this relation with cryptocurrencies and blockchain. This is changing very quickly. We have to be very careful about things that are fashionable. I remember this. I'm an art historian too. I like going back in the history. I remember the aesthetics of the sociology of art and the aesthetics of the communication as well, of the Fred Forrester who purchased in the world a green virgin space, I think it was in the 1970s, where the people could write their own advertising and then afterwards sold a land which was a virtual land with a work of art. So all of this doesn't date back to dates back to today. So we mustn't create a model based on another. I'd like to see what's going to happen with this use of the cryptocurrencies, but how the creators are going to use this. At the moment, it's not the creators who are making money from this. It's more financiers, as usual, and the capitalists, the financial people adapt very, very quickly. And here they found a source of money. So it's up to the artists to take over, along with the researchers, because this is quite complicated. 2 years ago, we did a whole cycle around the blockchain and the different ways of creators with economists who was talking to artists, with lawyers, and also cultural managers to see how this method we could help creativity. I think all this is interesting, but we mustn't get too go overboard on the fashionable aspects. So we mustn't forget that 90% of the business model is not current today, and it's existed before. So thank you very much, Philippe. The time's up. Thank you very much for all this interesting expression refusing the all ego. I really like this. You found your words very well. So thank you very much for all this. I think we all need to work on this, including in the cultural world. So thank you, Philippe. Now we're going to let you for 20 minutes. We'll back in 20 minutes. The presentation of the two artists which Garance is going to present, Oscar A. and Alex Augier. So we're going to begin with a presentation. Oscar A, who's a French artist who lives in Saint-Étienne. He does installations and experimental videos where he mixes new technologies and drawing. He's at the moment in the research residence of VIDEOFORMES in Jaligny-sur-Verbe in France, and he proposes temporary and immersive experiences in which the spectator has a decisive role without deciding how it's going to end up. And so going to let the artist do it as possible. And this is important in terms of the fulfillment of the art. And now I'm going to let us see Oscar the video. So the type of video which I've done is a video that was attached to, there's a little sound work which was very strongly associated with this. And so these are videos where there's a lot of activity, a lot of things happening at the same time, which are happening. And plus progressively, I was interested in the physical elements, as I started working a lot of particles, and so this meant a lot of work of programming and quite a lot of time spent on the computer. And then coming back to France, I started to be able to film more the real, things that are real, and to compose more with images which are not so concrete, but also working on the abstract, with the different viewpoints. I'm not necessarily trying to do a painting on movement, which I was really looking at to do at the beginning, but to go more work on the imagination that could be activated by an image, so in a way sort of less forcing the imagination. And so progressively I also by the desire to go out from my workshop to go meet people, I went towards an image which is closer to the real, but this time it's in the real where I'm trying to find some imagination. So practically what I been doing for 1 year now with the project of the water lilies. So what I got flexible sculptures which are yellow, and they've done this from tents which I use, and I install these elements on the landscape. And so this questions or challenges our way of seeing landscapes, but also the structure of the landscape. And so these elements are vibrating, almost living. And so what I'm filming is both these offers, which only have a meaning once they're rolled out in the space, but also these relations these sculptures are going to have with people, in fact. So the total French population is 67.1 million inhabitants. It's composed of 32.4 million men and 34.67 million women. I'm part of it, the population. I'm part of the 67% of French people who've got a bath. I'm part of the 8 million students who've passed the French baccalaureate. And I'm part of the 40% of short-sighted people in France. I'm part of the 4,067 Jonathans who have passed the baccalaureate and the 26% of them who had passed with honours. However, if I was called Oscar in 2002, I would have been part of the privileged category of 50% of having a passing with distinction. I'm part of the 52.1 million French people who are between 20 and 55 years old. Like 12% of people, I forget to stop the water when I'm brushing my teeth. I'm part of the 9% of the people who iron. I'm part of the 16.6 people who are going to die from suicide, and I'm likely to be able to more chance of dying in 10 years' time because I'm a man, and also I've got climbing ropes, or I climb mountains. So, with the installation of the water lilies, which everybody's called chips, so I was in between the air and I was starting to moving towards the poetry of water, and this is really became more important after 2019, where I worked a lot on doing the floating anchors in the workshop. And so this is a year when we're locked down. I also worked a lot in my bath by putting different liquids in my bath, which I would catch with a sheet. And I let myself be cradled by this poetry of the water. And via this, what was really driving me was the reflection on how water could lead the individual to exist and to go beyond oneself. So my research work is focusing on the myth of Echo and Narcissus. And with this preoccupation of the impossible mirror, of which can often water in movement and water in vibration. So in the context of this research, some have been experimented on the installation prototypes in my residence in Gelligny in France, but also in the framework of another residence, is a residency of art and science in the LIX laboratory in the Polytechnique Engineering School, where I am at the moment. So thank you very much, Oscar A. Oscar A. Now we're going to look at the second artist. So Garance, could you introduce him? So thank you, Elise. So we're going to do the presentation, Alex Augier. I think slight problem with the microphone here. So we are going to the presentation, Alex Augier. So Alex Augier is an electronic musician who lives in Paris, in France. He's fascinated by the aesthetics of the digital and proposes audiovisual performances in which the image and sound mix to be able to occupy the space. So the heart of his performances, he decides how the work is going to go, like a contemporary orchestra. So it's the 360-degree performance post, which was presented at the festival this year. So if we could launch the video, please. So hello, my name is Alex Augier. So I propose me to present my work in 10 minutes. So this is what I'm going to do. So I consider myself as a musician above all, but as a musician who's got a cross-functional activity by mixing music with other media, visual media in particular. And so for these 10 minutes, I'm going to show to you my way of looking at audiovisual performance is to consider this is a specific field of creation. So what I mean by this is an audiovisual performance is not an audio and visual performance. It's not associating music with images, as this would be the case for seeing a film or a video of a pop concert or a lot of electronic music concerts, which consider themselves as audiovisual performances, but simply a visual support to music. With this completely interchangeable element, you could change the music or the visuals. It would function differently, but it would still work. So myself, I think about proposals where all these elements are perfectly linked, intimately linked, technically, artistically, and the sound, and are completely independent of the two. It's not possible to remove one of the elements without destroying completely the project. And so these projects associate sound, image, but also set design, space, scenographics. So I'm going to take two examples. So Nibble in 2016, and more recently, Post. So in the case of Nibble, the audiovisual intention was to propose to the public a spatialization experiment, but remaining on scene with a frontal theatrical presentation. So for this, I had 4 transparent screens around me. I used 2 video projectors, and with a mapping technique, this adapted to the layout of these screens. Of each of these screens, I've associated a sound broadcasting point, a speaker. This enabled me to keep 4 different spaces in the space of the stage, right, left, and what's going to appear to the public as being close and far away. And so given this installation, I did a music and images which were completely linked to these structures. So each technical element is going to go from one area, one space to another. And so this is going to go. So what this means, this structure, it is here before to drive the point of view, audiovisual point of view at the beginning. But our attention is possible thanks to this structure. So the easiest thing is to be able to show to you a few images. So what's also important in this desire to be coherent and consistent is my performance on stage is done by doing the audiovisual medium from one single content. From Nibble, I use my modular synthesizer. So this is done to manufacture sound, even though it's a synthesizer, and this is going to have an impact on the music and also the visual, but also the space. I'm not trying to look at doing one or the other dependently. When I reduce the time of a sound envelope, this is going to reduce the time of the sound, but also the vivacity of certain visual elements, sorry. And so I interpret from one single control pointer, and that's very important of my projects and what renders them specific. So finally, these structures use a certain type of music for this. You can't broadcast any type of music to this. This music was designed specifically for this structure, and this structure was designed to be able to broadcast this music, and the images are intimately linked with all of this, so in a technical and artistic manner. The second example is poster. So this is a cylindric, transparent screen. So here you wanted to have a audiovisual spatialization, a different way. The public is around the structure, and itself is surrounded by a crown of speakers. So the public is in the field of a sound synthesis. We're able to position sound, and the cylindrical screen is going to be able to position the images. For example, here there'll be sound and image at this point here, sound and image at this point here, and then obviously you can move it, shift it, and as the screen is transparent, a person situated closer to an audiovisual event can be seen by transparency what's happening elsewhere for other audiovisual elements which can be far away. And he or she can see these elements come closer from his or her left or right, for example. It's because is this audiovisual specialization in this configuration, which is not a traditional configuration. And I thought that this structure to be able to spatialize the images in relation with the spatialization of sound. So there's a temporary and spatial synchronization. So I'm going to show you now one example. And so the previous project showed there's the question of the performance. This time it's not done by modular synthesizer, it's done by mono gray arc controllers. I've chosen these because they're in perfect coherence with the global aesthetics of the project. And this, the same way, is always in the desire to have everything be coherent, of all the elements are coherent, as this object is linked with the macroscopic form which the public see. And so they're four rotating encoders. These encoders are completely in relationship with the cylindric form of the structure. And there's so these LED lights give the position of the audiovisual aspects, and I can change these positions. I can even use them as a sort of like if you're scratching a vinyl record. And so there's 8 times 16 buttons. If we take a line, there's 16 buttons from left to right. Each of these buttons are going to correspond to each of these images. If you take the images of the first row, there's 2 rows on the photograph. The first row, there's 16 of these buttons correspond to one of these. If I press on the button, I'm going to activate a sound, an image on one part of the structure. If I if I press on 8 buttons later, I'm going to activate a sound on the opposite side of the space. So this is how it enables me to play with sound, space, and image in the most simplest, the most direct way possible. So it was a lot of work to be able to program all these interfaces, because these interfaces are empty shells. You need to program everything, so it becomes something which is personal. And so this was a lot of work to do. But for me, this is part of the specificity of the project. And so this audiovisual performance works with these structures, these types of images, these type of controllers, and this everything is linked. And then plus, and this is another point, is the music which I've chosen is the music which wants to be techno-type music, which is my project, is part of one of the most techniques which is most used by electronic music, which is loops, looping, and sampling. So I've built samples beforehand, and I use these samples in the framework of my performance in the form of loops, and very unusual types of loops, and I break them down by fragment. I republish them by fragment, and I recreate this in space. All of this is linked, and so what I wanted to show to you is via these two projects is how I look at audiovisual as a specific field of creation. The idea is to create original objects where everything is linked, where everything is completely independent, and this is what makes the originality of my work. Thank you very much. Sincerely. So it's now we're going to do the third part of today's session. And so I'm now going to invite the artists to join me on stage. So we're going to welcome Oscar A, who we saw, and Alex Augier, who we didn't see in the presentation they did of their videos. And so normally Philippe Philippe is also here on Skype, so great, we can hear you still. And the sound's working this time, great, fantastic. So it's important in this connected society we live in. So, hello Alex, hello Oscar. So I think we're missing a microphone for our guests. So they're going to need to be able to share the microphone. That's not very COVID friendly, is it? Fortunately, your mask, so Garance, you remain with the microphone if there's any reactions or questions. So don't hesitate. So now we're going to have a quick exchange. So I'm masked. I've got a mask too. So it's a good idea. So I don't know if you can see him on screen that he's got a bit of scotch on his face. Now I can speak, so thank you very much, VIDEOFORMES. You're freeing up my words. So we're going to come back to this round table, which we called Resonance. Thank you, Tessa and Garance, who found the theme. And so really appreciated, Philippe, this term that came back in your presentation several times. I don't know if we inspired you or if you're already inspired before. So we're going to be able to, the round table is going to be based on sound. So Transcultures is a digital sound center. So yourself, you create sound, and also you teach sound culture. So you can talk about this. We're welcoming, begins with Alex, who's to my right. So to remind you that you do audiovisual performances live, this is what he showed us in his 10 minutes presentation of his video. So organic, open, live works, and should remind you, you're going to do a performance tomorrow night. Fortunately, you'll be in VIDEOFORMES at least until the end, until Sunday. So remain connected. Now, Alex, you're going to talk a bit about your world and the performances you do. And so we saw that it was this audiovisual spatialization of 360 degrees. And so this is a very unusual context and space which you're going to talk about. And plus, Oscar, you seeing that we saw you've got, I really like these water lilies, these encounters, mergers, shocks of which you talked about. I'm not sure if all three of you heard about, there's a project called Music Makers and Machines, which is a large virtual exhibition on the history of the electronic music. I think, Philippe, you'll like this. This is created by Google Arts and Culture and YouTube. And I saw this in the Electra Montreal site. We know Electro very well. And this project, Music Makers and Machines, have you heard about it? I think it's probably quite new, so. I couldn't hear what he said, so I think he's just received some information about it. So we're going to begin. First question. So we talked about intermediate works or transdisciplinary experiences. What for you is a transversal, multimedia, intermediate work? And in these works, what is the share of the weight of sound in these works? Maybe we'll let the artist to start up, if one of them wants to start. Alex or Oscar? Alex, maybe? So I saw that you talked about the word audiovisual in your presentation, and so you've reminded us of this. For each of you, I learned in the conversations we had with you beforehand, there's a really think about your language. You said this too, given a moment. It's not interchangeable. So you work on the image and also the work on the sound. Maybe could you better explain this work on each of the different mediums? So I've explained quite a bit of this on my presentation. What I could add is that, for example, in my way of working, it's for the two projects which I talked about, Nibble and Post. So I work right from the beginning on an audiovisual idea. I don't work on the music on one hand, say I'll do the images afterwards, or inversely. So right from the beginning, I try to find an audiovisual image. I call this an audiovisual idea. So this works together, and it cannot work else another way. It can only exist in this form. So right from the beginning, I do make tests, audiovisual tests. I work a lot in Max, so I program in Max. The things of the result is audiovisual, and use this as a basis to be able to fine-tune things. And maybe in the second phase, I'm able to find the aesthetic direction, the type of image, or the type of music I want to use. So all of this is done in parallel. But so what I want to say is right from the beginning, I try to think audiovisually. So as at the beginning. So there's no hierarchy, there's no prioritizations, one or the other. It's done. The question of the hierarchy, I'm trying to ask myself this question directly. No, I don't think. I think there's a superiority, musical superiority, but I may have to look more into this. So I've lost my train of thought in between times. So what I try to do is to work both at the same time. I don't do a soundtrack. I'm not taking the image to accompany the music right from the beginning. Something needs to be able to work technically right from the beginning. So maybe, Oscar, you could add something to this. I was talking about hierarchy. I've understood what you're interested to use. The tension is working between the different universes, different worlds. How do you perceive this? How could you explain this? So that's a trick question. So I've come to the image from the music, and I came from music from image, because when I was a young child, as my grandfather was a painter. So I've always, how can I say this? I've always mixed the two. The two are blurred, the two, if you want. Finally, now if I look at these two worlds, or the different worlds, because there's not just the image and sound, because I also work with space in my installations, where the public audiences are invited to come in and to react. Almost, I didn't show you my installations on the video. I really wanted to focus on the more video and the work I've been doing, research I've been doing these past few years. Now I tend to see the symbiotic weight of each medium. So what works with an image and what works in the musical language. If it's not musical, maybe it's not necessarily in part of a time which goes from A to Z. In a more broader sound, I work on different values. It's like in drawing, when you go to art school, they ask you to learn to draw just with a pencil and to working on different values. And I try to do the same thing with the music as with the image. Sometimes the image takes over on the sound, other times it's the opposite. So I like more and more work to work on silence, to let this breathe if you want. So this coming now because I started my work by indexing one medium onto another. That's a choice. It depends what we want to signify, to mean. I'm not sure if I was clear there. So yes, of course. I felt that in your work that you had two approaches to sound, if I've understood this properly. Please tell me if I'm wrong. So the first one is the sound as a vector. You talked about opening doors. Yes. That was interesting. Maybe if you could talk a bit more about that, and in particular with the text, he works with any type of sound medium. It's like, Alex, I can use sound as, how can you say, as the image is going to index on the sound. We have machines which look at the monitor the frequency, the rhythm, the intensity, and this generates images, or such and such an action is activated. So, but it means the sound is a channel to be able to transmit messages, but it's also what we hear directly. I like to work on this, to play with these, what we hear, what we don't hear, to know that there is a channel which is here, but we don't perceive it, or we have to listen very closely. It's the same for the image. I noticed, for example, just before there was images and movement, there was films. We really see the movement of the cameras. When you see the movement of the cameras, for me, you're seeing it's the person who's filming is very present. So very often what I do, there's no movement of the camera. It's something which is here as like as a witness. If I take the camera to move it at this moment, not only I've got a flue that's passing, but there's another flusing which is passing by there. What did I want to show? And so this is why that I showed in my small presentation, when you see me doing this performance in the bath, and you've seen the audience looking at me in the bath. So we're not necessarily sure what's happened, where's the origin of it. So it was the idea of the sound as a vector, as a passage, but there's also a second time around the composition. Are we talking about composition or not? Maybe you can reply, Oscar. Alex, is this notion of composition, is this something that you believe in? Is this something, can we use this creation to the work that you perform, that we experiment on? First of all, Alex, maybe, and then Oscar, you can talk about this idea. So I'm not sure if how I should understand the question. So in any way, for the case of post, so I had the impression at the end that to create an instrument, not an instrument just of music, but an audiovisual instrument. So by composing, I composed a system, in fact, a system where I've got interfaces. The interface is a relationship with the structure, what the audience sees. This enables me to do such and such a music in such and such a manner, etc. So finally, that's what I created. But in this instrument, musically, I can go into different types of directions. I've chosen one more than another because I felt this was more coherent for me. But finally, I composed a system. That's it. I'm not sure if that corresponds to your question. Yes, yes, yes. The idea beyond the working, the image and sound is creating an instrument. This is the strong. When I use the word specific, that's what I'm thinking of. I've manufactured or produced an environment which is particular and specific to this event. So on this question of the composition, maybe Oscar, you can get back to us. I see you studied in Montreal, Montreal in Canada. So Jean Pichet is a mixed contemporary composition. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I see the work that was done with Pierre Michaud, who you know as well, who's a professor. And I saw that he was a professor of controvisation. I'm not sure if that's the right word. So if this is something you knew about your period, can you tell what is it? Composition? Can we compose in a universe like yours, a world like yours, which is open to the which is infinite in a way, in which the visitors and publics move? So there's several levels to this. So I want to regard what Alex said, what I see in your work. There's already a mechanism in place which you create a device and then you compose with it in real time, more or less. There's a part of improvisation and a part of composition, if I understood clearly. But first of all, the composition is present at the moment in which you do you program the computer, when you create the scene, the stage, the visual aspects. And so we're here. So we are creating our instruments with existing digital instruments, a computer, for example, but we recreate each of our instruments at the moment to be then recreate a music or an art with this instrument. So either it's music from the scene, it's performance, or whether it's installation. Recently, what I've done, which is quite close to this work, is on the wall-to-wall installation I had, where the audience can come in and deposit text, and on 24 sculptures. These are small vases in silk paper suspended with speakers, and there's a time which is composed and there's a time which is interactive, and it's not the same level for me. So in the act of composing, for me, there is something which is voluntary. For example, I'm not sure if Cage has really always composed. He probably wrote works of art which are composed, like his piano work and his performances, and he calls this word performance. So I think that I think it depends on the context, it depends on the situations, and what interests me in particular is to go into in the field of installations. In the field of installations, we work at the different levels, the different times, different spaces, and we can each level has its own aesthetics, with, in addition, the opportunity to propose completely different experiences for the audience. Each person has a different experience, and this is what really interests me. So to come back to in Montreal, where I discovered the digital arts, even if I started contemporary composition in Lyon with a lot of programming. And then here what we're doing, we're indexing the sound, the reactions, whether they're sound or visual, on what was written for people playing instruments. I did one for the cello, played for Olivier Gailly. So depending of his movements on the different musical notes that were played, such and such an action happened. So progressively we develop a logic of interdependence, and this is very present when we do improvising. But what interests me in this is everything is what's sensitive, and this shows what I showed in the film. I'm trying to, almost like being a sociologist, I'm trying to design a profile of who I am by these percentages. We're all here. So we put sensors pretty much everywhere to be able to capture things that escape us. That's why I put sensors in our installations. Why I'm trying to do projects to see what's going to happen, then to be able to do something with it. At some time, not do it because it was just enough to show what happened. So good. So we'll come back to this question of the place of the creator and the visitor and the audience. Maybe I'll ask Philippe something with regard to your experience on the questions of composition, of interaction, the question of the installation or not, the idea of doing things with sound or not doing sound. So the idea of composing, do we need to compose? Is there a work of composition in the traditional meaning of the term? Or how do we do this with a work on the interaction and the sound and the visitor? Is it on this how you work with sound at your level? So first of all, the work of sound is very diverse. I don't say we should do this or do that. We can use different methods, different ways of composition. I like the words improvisation. I didn't know you could do lessons of improvisation. This is a word I used with before. So I like this word because it seems quite adapted to what's happening a lot of music at the moment. So finally, there is spaces of freedom or random spaces with certain points of reference, whether it's with these devices which are very technological or improvised music on its own. There's always certain reference points. So what will be the difference between the improvisation and composition? Because improvisation is a real-time composition, and the composition is going to restructure a form of improvisation depending on different methods which are more or less coherent. So for me, all the methods are open, all the ways of composition, of improvisation are open. I'd like to come back to the word resonance. I think this was the theme, and this is the word that for me, I would even go to another level beyond our little things we do, our installations, our compositions. I think this is a small recipe. It's interesting, but it's maybe interesting amongst all of us on a technical level, but maybe a bit less interesting for the audience that maybe not know all these techniques beyond the word resonance, beyond the relationship with music. I think it's very important in the current state of the world at the moment. I really liked the philosophy. I like transversal philosophy. I used to teach philosophy. I'm really interested in the book by the German philosopher who used the word resonance after having studied what is the acceleration. And so it's interesting. So I didn't catch the name of the German philosopher. So this is all this word of innovation, the dictatorship of the innovation, technological change, hypermodernity, the rhythm of our lives, burnt out, widespread burnt out. On the other level, there's a slow culture, slow food, too slow. So there was enough to slow down to be able to re-find ourselves, where there's other theories like the Williams and Sterneck economists in their manifesto for acceleration, saying that no, we need to go even further. We need to accelerate more the movement towards to go to beyond the type of nostalgic left and the neoliberalism and capitalism. So the question of the resonance of all of this, so the resonance with regard to the world, and obviously what we create as well in our art, but beyond this in our lives. And I really like the Albert Troza's reflections. For him, and against this acceleration, alienation, he uses the word resonance as an affectionate corporal body cognitive relationship with the world, and the fact that in which the subject is just not just a fragment of the world, but try to reply to the world by acting concretely with him or her, or with it. Sorry. So this is what we're trying to do in our life of men and women, or as artists, is this relationship to the sensitive, to the. I love this book by Jacques Rancière. Let's come back towards the sensitivity, the need to relationship, need for diversity of our ways of living and creation, and come back to something more, a sensitive relationship and resonance in any form. For me, this resonance to the world is the opposite of the alienation. It is the opposite of looking inwards, which is being experienced significantly today. I don't think I've replied. I don't think I answered at all to your question, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about this. But we talked about sampling and looping, so it's very interesting to loop back to resonance. So before we continue, are there any questions, any comments here on the few people here on the audience of their practices, of what they've done in terms of the sound and the place of sound? So don't hesitate, there's a microphone here. So I don't know if there's got any feedback on the chat regarding these questions. No, not for the moment. So don't hesitate to ask a question. So I'd like to come back maybe on the idea of being the sensitive, of the resonance, these resonance with a space. We'll see with Alex. This question of space is important, of the residence in terms of the intimacy of the visitor. So there's two quite different approaches which we could note here, that we can say that Oscar is the idea of what Garance said at the beginning, to let things go, let things happen. So each experience is specific to the visitor, if I've understood clearly. So whereas for Alex, there's more the idea that you're one with your instrument and the idea of a whole. The place of the visitor is completely different in your relationship between the performance you're going to do on Friday night and others. And for example, Oscar's experiments, can you come back to this relationship you have with the visitors and how your work resonates with the visitor? Can't hear his sound.
En fait, c'est comment.
So how do we perceive the spectator, the work which I'm proposing? I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea. Finally, we're getting there, says Philippe Frank. So I'm not quite sure I'm going to answer your question, but anyway, I've done this type of proposition because I asked myself personally what was my place in the stage with regard to the electronic music, also in the sense that there was a visual proposal. So I needed to define my place. I didn't want to be simply in front of the screen or just to say I'm here. So I put myself on stage, so I directly in with my audiovisual equipment to be one. This is what led me to make this type of proposal. Afterwards, effectively, the residence is a term I use to talk about my work, about all the different elements. So effectively, I use the expression of entry into residence, the moment when things join together in a moment of stability. So to be able to do something which works together. However, the residence of the public, I've got no answer to give you there. I think there'll be diverse personal answers they'll give to that question. Is it specific to your work, or is it specific to the electro music? I know there's how can you stage certain electro music festivals? The body of the musician is problematic, and the fact you see them switching and pressing on buttons and everything. The spectator, we don't have the same relationship with somebody who has an instrument where you see the movement of which is created. And I think it's possibly more difficult in this field. Talk about the dialogue you've had with others. This is a question I've asked myself. This is a question which is asked broadly because we're not on musical proposals like, I've forgotten the term, acousmatic. So sorry. So we are in a sound musical strict proposal. So here we don't ask ourselves a question what the spectator is going to see. There's nothing to see. So here there's something which is visual, but at the same time it's not a film I'm playing. It's a show. So I think that the question is asked, and I think we need to ask ourselves a question, propose something. We need to put ourselves on the stage, or at least that's what I said to myself. Then, but each to his own. I've forgotten the question again. So Philippe, you want to react here? So I think the question of the body in electronic music is interesting because it's for sure there is we tend to forget the body at a given moment. Now maybe it's changing with the new forms of electronic technologies, or a time of the movements of the musician, which is showcased via these different interfaces, notably with images. I know there are other instruments being invented which reposition the virtuosity thankfully good, because everybody was hiding behind their computer and it was dreadfully boring. I remember a concert a very long time, maybe 25 years ago in Brussels, in the Botanic. We organized two electronic musicians who are very well known. One was Marcus Pop and Scanner. The other was called Scanner. And then Scanner said to the person after the concert, "Did you see what I was trying to communicate to you?" He said, "Nothing. I didn't see. I sent you an email." So that was while he was playing the music, he was sending the email, and he was joking in a very cynical manner. This way, we didn't really care about it. So something which happened sort of completely removed the body towards showcasing the machine and the computer. And I think we've gone beyond this stage now. Unfortunately, there's devices where the body comes back, and there's lots of things we need to invent in terms of the body movement of the musicians, or as well the spectator can interact as well. There's lots of things to invent in that way. Great. So I think we wasted a lot of time to hiding behind our small screen. There's nothing more boring than an electroacoustic concert when we're pressing buttons, where we see a mixing table, see something trying to spatializing in real time, and other people are sleeping at the same time. Why not? It's not too bad. We're not trying to say there's a concert or a show. There's nothing worse than to pretend that this is a show. So I think there's lots of things to do. I know there's researchers who are working a lot on this. There's loads of new instruments. There's loads of new interfaces, devices. There's body and digital devices going to be on stage soon, and great. And I think we're going to a new epoch. And thankfully, you've got any more specific examples recently of trends? So this is not that Mateo Kanatawa of the Japanese composer, apologize for the accent, who works on the interfaces with the body and worked with a visual French artist, the group in the beginning of the 2000s, working with the sensors on the bodies to do an audiovisual concert together, which everything started from the body. First of all, I thought that was interesting. So here we're talking about something that's 20 years old. So since I could give quite a lot of example here in Mons, we've got once we're working on different technologies, digital. So this needs to get out of the laboratories. The musicians need to be able to use this. Musicians need to be able to do their own thing. I think this is very possible today without it being too complicated, and to find a body gesture I think the body gestures leads to other forms of compositions, other relations with the stage, and a lot less fixed or static. So Alex, with regard to this body question regarding the body, is this something you've asked yourself right at the beginning? This is what pushed you to work on the image, to work on the 360 degrees. Are there any sensors? So for me, I put myself on stage with my device or my mechanism, but effectively, I'm not very interested, at least at the moment, by the body movement. I don't see myself dancing on stage to be able to produce sound. This is a direction which I'm not taking because maybe I'm a bit lazy, or not in the sense of these don't need to do gestures, big gestures to be able to produce sound. There's lots of instruments where it's very, very subtle movements and gestures. So I don't want to, for me, I don't want to go to another excess. There's one excess is looking behind a screen and almost proposing a studio work. The other excess is to put sensors everywhere to dance. Here, I think in the field of the dance, there's effectively that might interest them more, dancers, to be able to produce sound from their bodies, because I think they're more specialist in the control and mastery of their bodies, whereas a musician, I'm not going to spend 2-3 years to be a virtuoso of my body, because it's going to demand a lot of work, and I'm getting old, so a bit rusty as well. So I think there's two excesses. So effectively, there's probably somewhere in the middle where the public, to be behind a computer is boring. I've done that myself. That's why I asked myself another question. But there's also an excess of too much body movement that goes beyond or outside of the field of music. Oscar, do you want to add to this? I think that this is what I really like in your work, is the fact that you're not adding noise to noise. So I don't trust all these. I've done many experiences this in Montreal with two people, Patrick Saint-Denis, who did fantastic projects on this, on augmented instruments, and I augmented my instrument too. But now, if I think, I'm perhaps a bit reticent about this way. I think we've all got a watch, but I don't have we've got a connected watch, we've got a connected fridge, connected trash can, everything is connected. So it gives us a lot of information about what to do. So connected and a dancer putting lots of sensors. If in the end, if we're still on the same proposal, which is not a proposal actually, in fact, something, it's more than a proposal. In fact, it's we're invading the proposal, and then we're going back to the model of a spectacle, a show, which we've tried to remove ourselves from, to withdraw it, to give more space to the visitor, to the spectator, so the audience can integrate something, so be able to do more democratic works of art. In fact, so I don't trust the digital art trends to say that it has to be spectacular, because we're used to this. Since we're being small, we're working on video games in front of the TV. We're adding noise to noise. It's very difficult for the human being to find oneself in that and to remove this noise. So I think we need to be responsible as a digital players. I don't think I'm not just that, but I think we know programming. We know what there is behind a computer and all these technologies, what it costs ecologically as well. So naturally, this is where the work can start, for example. So it's really important for me to do installations that work on my old PowerBook G4. So to do installations work cheaply, we can't do everything this way. But to be able to say the question of the interaction effectively dates back to the 1990s, maybe before. So I'm thinking of the MIDI sequencer, and musically, what have we done artistically more, not necessarily things are that in depth, deeper that way. So I think there's work to do. Okay, we capture things, we create devices, mechanisms. Why are we doing this? And for me, it's to be able to talk about the resonance, to look at the sense of sensitivity, but not sensitivity which is directed. But I think to be able to do this, we need to give the keys to the audience. Here, there's such and such an element to capture things, such and such things. You can do it as you want. So, but depending on what you're going to do, the work of art won't be the same. In this way, we involve the audience. So I think this is a very different way of working, and we need to see with Alex. In my opinion, Alex works on the resonance. So for there's resonance, there really needs to be a shock, and then you need to work on the sound, the medium. This comes from over time. For a long time, there's a performance time, which is really quite almost like a shaman. You're entering something quite unusual now. You're entering to something in the context of an installation or a simple concert, or even just watching a film. We all come with our own experience before. And so what we are going to contribute is going to be in tension with what people the baggage they've come into. So dance needs a lot of free space to create these resonances, so where something can happen. So I think for there to be resonance, there has to be a device or mechanism that enables this resonance, enables us to host this, and not to fix what we're trying to do beforehand. And it's very difficult for creative people, especially in a society like ours, when we decide to what we're waiting for. So I think that will resonate to Alex, the fact of not setting things in stone. You work beforehand. What is how much do you let things happen as you as a creator? What's your feeling in the center of this work? The time that's accomplished during the work. This idea of not everything be set in stone. So how do you compose with this? So for poster, it was a sort of co-improvisation, if you want, a composition improvisation. So it was a composition improvisation. So I created a system. I used samples which I create beforehand, but I used them in a very unusual way. I destructured them completely. Myself, I discover things direct, live. I react to what I'm listening to, depending on what I'm listening to. And so I rehearse, or I repeat myself. And when I repeat or rehearse, these things work better than others. Like any musicians, the things that work better, I'm going to put them aside to say, I can maybe redo this. And by redoing this, I won't do them exactly the same way. I think it meant the things that didn't work so well there. But so this is what I do. So I've got reference points. I know things which work well. And I know it's go from this step to this step. But between the two, I've got the freedom to do new things, and so I think I can take risks. Means I can take risks. I can consider I'm only playing things that seem the safest, but in fact I can go to another direction myself, where I'm going, and will I be able to fall on my feet, or will it not be boring? So this is the musicality of things you look at. So this project, I've designed it as a system. It's a system which enables improvisation. So effectively, of the word of today, resonance. So me, when I'm going to play, means there's moments where it works well, and I enter into resonance, how I resonate with the audience, or even the composition, even though so I spend more time on this part of the composition because it's working well, before risking the next change, which might not be so good. So I think the time is up. So now we're going to finish today's session. So Philippe, if you've got a quick word to wrap up, I really like this. We've traveled between the email you're sending when what do you do, or the fact that you can't go too much spectacle, too much. If you want to just conclusion. So in the word of resonance, is the property of the body to enter into vibration. You mustn't think of this body aspect where it's a choreography or how it's done. So in echo with other devices, there's nothing which is good or bad. There's lots of things which are possible to explore. Each person, each artist needs to be able to find their own resonance with regard to their creativity and their way of expressing themselves, but also the type of relationships they want to establish in a certain context with the audience, who are more or less active. I'm completely guess a sort of a dictatorship of the interactivity is omnipresent today, which I mean the large button. There's no big red button in an installation to press. It's not interesting. No, not at all. I think the best thing of interactivity is the emotion which we succeed. It means the sensitivity we've been able to give to the audience. So on this point, maybe the best resonance, which is going towards the intimacy, towards a quality-based relationship rather than a quantity-based relationship, not necessarily a technological one, but one which is body of closeness. I'm talking about body not just in its way of demonstrating things, but I'm talking about the sound body. Here, what we create is from a sound body towards other bodies listening. So we mustn't forget this. We must work on it. So there's lots of different pathways, more or less technological, which are interesting to succeed. And this should also be match our relationship with the world today, which should not be an alienated world, but a world which resonates. Thank you very much, Philippe. So we're going to finish this sequence now. I'm going to let Gabrielle take over, who's going to say what's going to happen next. So we'll be back at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Thank you very much, Philippe. So hi to John Sanbon. So this red button, it looks like these are all science fiction books. There's a lot of inventiveness in old technology. So thank you very much to all three of you. I'd like to thank you for the quality of this debate. Simply say, to illustrate these exchanges, there's two very good examples. One, tomorrow, we're going to discover the work of Alex. On Saturday night, there's a dancer choreographer who works with connected objectives, who produces sound and image, and to be discovered, and I didn't catch that person's name, sorry. And so last point, 6 p.m. today is the opening of the virtual exhibitions. So connect yourself on the site from 6 p.m. French time. You've got about 20 minutes to see all the different installations will be presented in VIDEOFORMES 2021. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good evening and have a good virtual visit of the exhibitions.